we always see that it's the oligarchs, the ultimate stakeholders and beneficiaries of this oligarchic system of governance, who are the most vocal defenders of democracy. Isn't that strange? Isn't it strange that billionaires and oligarchs like George Soros and his son Alex Soros are bleeding heart defenders of democracies, as though they really believe that the power should rightfully reside with the ordinary people, that George Soros and company want us to have power, not them? That's obviously another deception. And so I think that the sentimental attachment to the concept of democracy is misplaced. And I also believe that if we study history carefully, we see that this same conflict between democracies and autocracies draws back all the way to the Greek antiquity. And then people are reticent. They think, oh, this is very bad. And I don't know why this is very bad. It seems to me that we have this kind of a sentimental attachment to the concept of democracy, because that's how we've been reared and educated all our lives, to cherish the rule of the people, for the people, and by the people. Except that I think that all these well-intentioned observers should look not at what they think things should be or what they tell us that they should be, but rather than what the system actually delivers. And we have seen the track record of these quote-unquote democracies, and they have given us all of these things that we have today: permanent wars, totalitarianism, repression, censorship, demoralization of people, collapse of the standard of militarization, this almost knee-jerk inclination to go to war whenever foreign policy is not going to plan. And we see this happening always stemming from these liberal democracies: the UK, the France, Spain, Germany, Scandinavian countries, Baltic countries, all of these new copy-paste democracies of the East. They gave us NATO, they gave us warfare. Now we have strong push for rearmament, militarization, reduction of social welfare states in favor of building weapons of war. I think we've come to the juncture where we have to rethink our concepts. That we have to study what systems actually deliver, not how they advertise themselves. And I think that we have to also shed this illusion. This is also a factoid which has been with which we have been brainwashed, that dictators and autocrats don't respond to the people. They do actually, and they are always very sensitive to the will of the people. I think that Trump's choice, if we just looked at the cost-benefit analysis, is very obvious, and that choice favors Russia. Ukraine has an estimated $12 to $14 trillion of natural resource wealth. Russia has an estimated $75 to $90 trillion in natural resource wealth. So the Russian deal, A, much bigger upside. B, the Russians are providing security for free. You don't need to risk US troops. You don't need to risk US military. You don't have to take the risk of World War III against Russia. The second problem is the downside risk. So if, let's say, Trump agreed with Keir Starmer that, like, okay, we're going to back you and you're going to give us, that is, Ukraine, Zelensky is going to sign over some mineral earths to us. For that, the United States have to give a security guarantee to Ukraine, which means that potential, that will be very, and then as Boris Johnson said, financial support. So you have to provide financial support to Ukraine and take the risk of war against Russia, because providing security guarantee means that you're going to go to war if Russia violates the territory that you're guaranteeing. So there's very little downside in doing a deal with Russia, and there's a much greater upside. Doing the deal with Ukraine under the leadership of the City of London has huge downside and very dubious upside. That's that. And then if the United States gets along with Russia, then it's not just the wealth that's there available in Ukraine, it's the whole 75 trillion worth of Russian resources that are available for joint ventures, mutual cooperation and development, And so I think it's pretty much a no-brainer unless you're completely obsessed with controlling that and dismembering Russia and regime changing Putin. And the downside is potential nuclear showdown with Russia. And the upside is rare earth minerals that are going to, the deal that is going to be implemented through some fund that's going to be created. And then the United States first has to provide the seed capital for this fund. And then they will get a portion of future proceeds. But they're not going to have necessarily full control over it. And then who knows what might be in it, because some experts that I read say that there are no rare earth minerals in any feasibly exploitable quantities in whatever is under Ukraine's control, and that whatever is there is already under Russian control. And so you can imagine that if United States eliminated income taxes, that the best segment of innovators, inventors, entrepreneurs from everywhere around the world might, in the long term, gravitate towards the United States and pursue the American dream, but for real, not a fake one. Who knows? I don't know. I think that this is entirely possible, and I really hope that they are working on that. I think that would be radical and revolutionary, but I think it's possible from what I read. I happen to live in a place where there's no income tax, and the place functions perfectly well. Income tax didn't used to exist in the United States before the advent of Federal Reserve. The government should be able to finance itself without income tax. And income tax is legally and morally wrong. It shouldn't be applied. We only just got used to it. It became a normal. It started with a little bit, but then a little bit more. And then, oh, look, we have a war. We have to support the war effort. It's going to be a little bit more. And it never goes back. Same in Britain. I think in Britain, they introduced the income tax at some point in 1700s as a temporary measure to finance some war emergency. And then it never went back again. And I'm not sure that this is going to be possible in the short term, but I wouldn't be surprised that they aren't preparing the terrain for that exactly. It would be absolutely revolutionary, but I think that it could really make America great again, because suddenly, as I mentioned, I live in Monaco. We have no income tax here. So what happens is that the majority of the population of Monaco, maybe 80%, are people who have been successful elsewhere and who earn enough money that by moving to Monaco, they actually save on their tax bills. I think that would also probably influence many other jurisdictions to follow suit, because if that became successful, if that program became successful, I think it would be very difficult for other nations to ignore it. I think that talking about bringing car production in the United States has the obvious benefit of creating jobs for the American people, and then you have their political support. Is this going to make a huge difference long term? I'm not sure, and I think it could blow back in some ways as well. I think that in part it's to do with boosting your negotiating position versus your neighbors. And then also Canada is part of the British Commonwealth. And it seems to me that Canada has been quite active in flooding the United States with fentanyl. It's not just Mexico. And I think that the Americans are aware of that. And so I think that putting pressure on Canada serves A, damaging their economy so that one day they might feel inclined to join the United States, and B, weakening the hand of London. I suspect that in part, with respect to Canada, for example, I think that they are actively engineering, for the lack of a better term, annexation of Canada. And the CIA playbook in changing governments usually includes destroying their own economies first. Because when the economy, as Nixon said, when they wanted to regime change Salvador Allende in Chile, he said, make the economy scream. Because when the economy goes south, then people are very unhappy, and then they want a change in government, and then you offer them a solution and you support people who will say, hey, this is not working out, we should be joining the United States. So that could be a part of it. So I think it's very difficult to judge all these moves without considering what the whole context might be. I think that the disadvantage that we have in the West, and that includes the United States, is that we have been at the receiving end of practically daily 24/7 campaign of demonization of Russia. Boris Yeltsin had approval rating of, depending on who you ask, between 2 and 6% in the 1990s. And his government was much, much more repressive than the government of Vladimir Putin is. But the fact that his government was repressive, the fact that he had a very strict control over the media space, much more so than Vladimir Putin, that didn't bother us in the slightest. We only liked him because he allowed Western financial institutions and Western corporations to do in Russia exactly whatever they wanted. So that's why we loved him. I think we have to overcome this fear of Russia because it's largely been contrived by propaganda and by distortions which absolutely do not correspond with the reality. And if you look at the let's say the polls which ask the Russians, are you happy? Are you unhappy? Do you feel free to pursue your life the way you want? Do you approve of your government's leadership? Do you think that the government is moving in the country is developing in the right direction? You will see that Russians overwhelmingly answer positively. And the understanding of what Russia is very distorted. We all think of it as some dark, rusty place where people have a miserable existence under some harsh, repressive dictatorship. But that's not the case at all. I think that people should consider visiting Russia, traveling there. If they can't, they should follow the account of Westerners who live in Russia, and they will realize that Russia is a normal place. It's not a upper Volta with missiles. It's an advanced, modern, technological society. It's an increasingly prosperous society. And many people in the West will then say, oh yeah, like in a dictatorship, if you criticize, then they come for you and they put you in prison. So people are afraid to say what they really mean. No, that's nonsense. I don't think there's any such understanding among the European leaders, which is why it's only a matter of time until they all get swept out of power. And so whether this is just posturing or whether these are real intentions, I think we'll find out with time. But just introducing tariffs like this without preparing the grounds could be very counterproductive. And I think it could actually be Donald Trump's Achilles heel, because if the economy goes south, if the US economy goes south, then he opens himself to attacks from his political opponents that are actually going to be gathering some public support. And then he's in trouble. And Donald Trump makes some of these statements, or other people in his administration, as pretexts to introduce tariffs against this or that country. But I'm not sure whether this is a real thing or if it's a negotiating ploy, because if you introduce tariffs against a country, you have to prepare the ground for it, because in and of themselves, tariffs can exacerbate inflation, which is already potentially a huge problem for Trump administration. There are measures that the Trump administration can take beyond just introducing tariffs, or he can take them in concert with the tariffs that could maybe create a buffer, create some financial cushioning. But I think that's going to take a lot of coordination. I think that all the talk about bringing Canada into the United States, bringing Greenland into the United States, I think they're dead serious about this. But if we take a step back, the key problem, the problem ultimately, is the overhang of unpayable debts in the United States economy. And you don't have too many ways around that. One of them is default, to say, we can't pay these debts, so we're not going to pay them, too bad, which would be very bad. Then a different way of default is through inflation, that you simply dilute those debts away. That you can manipulate to, let's say, soften the blow from inflation and all this debt, or to reduce the impact. And what exactly the administration is going to do about all this is not clear to me. And I think it's not clear because they can't say it obviously, because they are going to get attacked by their opponents. So I think that some of it is going to be by stealth. And then the real moves, the big moves that they're going to make, I think that they're going to be ambushing us all collectively. But you can also go the route of increasing the economies, increasing the wealth and productivity in the economy. And bringing in Canada and Greenland could be part of that strategy. If you avail yourself of if the economy of Canada suddenly came under the American economy, that would be effectively bringing in wealth from there into your economy and, let's say, refloating it. Same with Greenland. There's going to be resources there that the American companies can exploit, that the American banks can fund, and that effectively constitutes new collateral that can back another major credit cycle and improve, let's say, reduce the drag from the debt overhang. But that's a whole lot of moving parts. Oh, I think that the same people are running the show in Germany as are running the show in Paris and in London. It seems to me that the whole agenda is to make a show of determination in order to impress the Trump administration, to say, wow, these people are really determined and they're putting real resources behind. They're putting their wallets where their mouth is. And yeah, let's close ranks with them. Let's support them. Let's back them up. And then the 800 billion euros that Ursula von der Leyen is now talking about, that's another piece of bait for the American military-industrial complex, because probably a lot of that money is going to be waved at them to say, hey, we're going to be building a lot of weapons here. How about you come here for some action? And then the American military-industrial complex is going to pressure Trump to join ranks with the Europeans. And then this is, I think, why, as all this is going on, there's a quiet purge going on at the Pentagon. And this is why Donald Trump and his governments are making sure that the people running the U.S. military are loyal to the administration and not to the globalist oligarchy.